Episode 102, Raleigh Keenan and Mike Geller, C-level executives at Tegrita, authors of the book, CMO to CRO, the revenue takeover by the next generation executive.
Yeah, there's purpose behind my decisions, and if things don't work out well, I learn from that and I move on.
I'm Mark Graban. This is My Favorite Mistake. In this podcast, you'll hear business leaders and other really interesting people talking about their favorite mistakes. Because we all make mistakes, but what matters is learning from our mistakes instead of repeating them over and over again. So this is the place for honest reflection and conversation, personal growth and professional success. Visit our website at myfavoritemistakepodcast.com. For show notes, links, and more, go to markgraban.com/mistake102. We're joined today, we have two guests. They are both C-level executives at Tegrita, a marketing technology strategy and consulting firm based in Toronto. And those two guests are Raleigh Keenan, he's the Chief Revenue Officer, and Mike Geller, the Chief Technology Officer. And together they are two of the three authors of a new book called CMO to CRO, the revenue takeover by the next generation executive. So we'll have a chance to explore some of that after we hear their stories and talk about that first. So Mike and Raleigh, first off, thank you for being here as a guest on the show. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you for having us.
Great. Thanks.
So we have the opportunity. We've only done a few episodes where we have two guests and two stories. And my understanding is that they are separate stories looking at the realm of a favorite mistake from our careers. So, Mike, I think you're going to go first and tell us what comes to mind for you. What's your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake, and I don't necessarily look at mistakes as specific things that I did or whatnot, because I'm usually there's purpose behind my decisions, and if things don't work out well, I learn from that and I move on. But one of the things that I do, rather that I've done, and I don't do nearly as much as I used to, is give away my time for free, which is sort of like an odd thing to do. But as a consultant, and while yes, I'm CTO, I am also a consultant, and consulting has always been a love of mine because I really get into the process. I love working with a client. I love ideating. I love coming up with solutions and trying to identify problems and running through all of that. But the problem with this is that if you get ahead of yourself and you don't actually apply value to your ideas, your time, then it does not get received well. There's no value associated to it because they didn't pay whatever amount for it. Like if you get something for free, you treat it like it's something that's free. If you pay $10,000 for something, you assign a lot more value to it. And I used to do this more so earlier on, where I would get ahead of myself and I would try to give all the answers, not really worry about scope or budget as much. Whereas now I know that if I try to do something what I think is valuable and nice, and the other person doesn't see it as that because we didn't have a conversation with them around why that's valuable, it can actually even backfire. So let alone not being sort of paid for your time, but also the work that you've done isn't even received well because the value of it was not understood to begin with. So, articulating value, getting buy-in on that before starting work is so critical. And it's something that I keep reminding myself every day because as a consultant, again, it's my time, it's my ideas that drives my value. So I can't give that away for free because it ends up shooting the idea down and it shoots me down too.
Now, what were the circumstances? Are you, in some cases, giving work away for free as sort of a foot in the door to then earn paid work? Are you doing pro bono work? Can you give an example of one of those circumstances?
Yeah. And so it's not so much as that, I'm doing work for free. I could have a contract already to do work, but let's say that contract is for X. but I also see an opportunity to fix Y. And I want to fix Y because I want to help my client out. And if I fix X, but I also fix Y because I got ahead of myself, then it ends up backfiring. So now the correct thing to do is, okay, I fixed X, and now client, I also noticed Y. What are your thoughts on Y? And do you see the problem with Y? Let me show you the problem that I see with Y. And let's work through it together as sort of a next project.
And do you find yourself sometimes forgetting that lesson or being tempted to go back into doing work for free? Do you ask Raleigh to call you on it? Or
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, it doesn't really happen very often anymore, just because as you get older, you learn to control yourself. But when it gets really interesting, it's very easy to get carried away.
all right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think there are different categories of that working for free trap. I mean, I've been involved a couple of times where I was doing some pro bono work for an organization, and I mean, I think they cared, but I think I see your point that their commitment level to it wasn't quite the same as somebody that was a paid client. So I think it's the risk that comes with you're trying to help someone. You might help them a little bit, even if it doesn't help as much as it could have. So
yeah, that's a great example. We did some similar work for non-profit, again, pro bono. And it was really difficult to have them engage with us in a timely way because, again, they didn't have any skin in the game, right? Like, if they're not having to pay for our time, then we're not a priority. And yeah, it ends up being a frustration at times on both sides. So again, the value associated with consulting, if it's free, then there's no value. That unfortunately is how it's seen.
Well, and I guess final thought I'll add is there's risk of that even as an internal employee. I can think of times when I was working as an engineer, I'm being paid by some central department and then I'm on loan to a certain business unit. I'm not on the business unit's payroll. And I've only jokingly said like the only two possible ROIs there were zero or infinity since they weren't paying for the time. And you're trying to get people's attention and trying to help. That's a battle I'd rather not have to fight anymore. All right. So Raleigh, in your role, I don't know if your story relates to what you do as chief revenue officer or something in your past work experience. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
Well, so I think what was most interesting about this assignment, it got connected to you, Mark, to find my favorite mistake. And my first thought was I could pick a lot of mistakes that are all extremely funny to hear about. And so I tried to think of one that was, I guess, more important or, ground shaking for me. So, but I'd just say I have a lot of mistakes in my life to choose from. I would say, it came down to a moment probably, I think it was 7 years ago. And I've had responsible revenue, client facing, high pressure roles since 1998. And that's been, a series of different kinds of roles from, that involved being an individual contributor and managing things. And about 7 years ago, I was kind of in, one of my last kind of hybrid roles where I had a lot of management responsibilities, but also a lot of individual contributing responsibilities. And I just finished a year and I'd been working remote. So I've been working remote for so long now that when the pandemic hit, I didn't know what all the fuss was about. I've been doing it forever. But I've been working remote and I'd done a year, and I'd been kind of brought on board by an executive because of my experience in predictive analytics. And, here we were coming to this meeting in January, and I'd been on for a little more than a year. And it was, I'd spent a year getting no support, no help, no connection to a bit broader business. And it was a very big company. And so predictive analytics, as much as we had made small roads here and there, it was pretty clear that the business was abandoning, even from the beginning, the whole reason that they had hired me. And so come January, I didn't know what to expect, because I was sitting down with the senior VP for our area and just wanted to know, what are we doing for the business? What should the plan be for the year? And I just remember, putting on my suit, and, because that was still a thing back then, for me anyway, and got in my car and was headed over there. And I just remember thinking that I really didn't know what to expect or what I was going to say. It was a very open-ended kind of feeling. And I, rarely was I in an office at all anyway. And so this was, these were one of the few moments I was in front of anyone internally, especially, and sat down. We went through kind of the year, and they sort of laid out, like, I'd say the summary of that was, I know we hired you for one thing, but we want you to do something completely different. And she got done with kind of like a presentation to me. And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I quit." And
you didn't even have to pause. You didn't even pause to think about it. It was just, "I quit."
It was a very strange feeling. I just knew the answer. I guess one of the few times in my life where I'm like, I know the answer. I quit. I didn't have another job. I didn't have a plan. I just, and it was like this mixture of, like, I did the right thing, but wait, you're not supposed to do that. She was really put off, like, on her heels. Like, she didn't know what to say. And I just kind of explained it to her, and she gave me a hug and I left. But, she just didn't really know how to take that. I'm sure no one had probably ever done that, my guess. But I just told her, I'm like, I could pretend like I'm going to do what you said and then look for a job and sort of, only partially do my job for the next 3 months while I land another one. But I said, I don't really want to do that. And I say it's my favorite mistake, because that was January. In February, I landed 2 sort of consulting clients right away, enough to kind of, get me by now that I didn't have a real job, and, doing some marketing consulting. And, I very quickly realized, I've got kids and I need health insurance. And so really quickly, I ended up calling a friend of mine and saying, "Hey, can you give me a job?" Because so it was just like, that was a mistake. And, it took a while, but, within about a year, I kind of look back on that, and, in light of what we're looking for here, it was my favorite mistake, because that went down, and I was really, I think, more of myself in that moment, in that meeting. And I think it's the self that, and I'll just go out on a limb here and say it's the self that, Mike hired me, like, just a raw, I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm not going to be rude about it. Mike has a certain phrase for how I do that, but, like,
you got to tell us what that phrase is.
I think it kind of freed me up.
You got to tell us what that phrase is. You can't leave us hanging.
Mike,
You're putting me on the spot.
It seems like Raleigh does that.
No, he does. It's I don't necessarily know that I have a phrase for it. It may be that I come to the same conclusion every single time unknowingly, which happens a lot for me. But yeah, no, Raleigh is good at nurturing me to say, I have this idea, you're gonna absolutely hate it, and then he says this idea, and I'm like, no, I love it. But it's very common. Because, Raleigh's not going to hold anything back. He's like, I think we should do this. Like, we've never done this before. Yes, but I think this nonetheless. And the conversation will go either, okay, let's explore that, or let's not and let's move on.
Yeah.
So, Raleigh, what was the phrase that you had in mind that you thought Mike would say?
Well, I was trying to remember it, and maybe it was Brandy, our other member of the executive team, management team, that said it, but it's like, something of a, rub your back while I give you bad news, pat you on the back. Was it Patton? I don't know. It was like a rhyming word. Maybe it was Brandy.
Pat you on the back as I kick you off a cliff.
Yeah. Something like that.
That's a good expression.
But it's, I think, like it was a ground shaking kind of mistake for me, because I think a lot of people can relate if they've had sales jobs or revenue responsible jobs, that you get into a rhythm of like what the people hiring you really want. And so you get really good at, here's how I do a presentation. Here's how I overcome objectives. Here's how they're going to want to see me, approach an account, anything you might do in an interview, or just things you do while managing your career. And all of those things are completely unnatural for me. And from my seat, a total waste of time. And so I made a habit, just like anyone, of I know what to say and do. And in that moment, I just gave it all up and just jumped out the window. And what it did was it kind of reset me in like, well, I just want to be free like this all the time. And so it started a bit of a habit with me of, I'm just going to make sure I tell people like what I really think, because I think it's more valuable than the things that I'm in the habit of doing, because I know people will accept them. So that was, I'd always had elements of it. I think if you talk to people from my career all the way back to, coming out of college, I do think people would say, oh, Raleigh does that. He's raw with his input and all that. But I knew I wasn't doing it 100% of the time. And so I think that mistake was just a lightning bolt for me of like, no, you can rely on your actual self. So not just yourself of what you can pretend to be or play the part of, but you can truly rely on yourself for the weird person that you are and how you see things from a really different perspective.
Yeah, it's funny you just said playing a part, because I had just jotted down what I hear you describing, Raleigh, was the difference between playing the role of what the salesperson is supposed to do and what they're supposed to say versus being authentic, or as you put it, being free, just to say what's on your mind. I mean, it sounds like do you think, is that something you had struggled with? I mean, like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, was this some grand epiphany, or was that something you were thinking of, like, I should just say what's on my mind? Like, were you coaching yourself up, or did that just happen?
Yeah, I think it was coaching myself up to, I'd found my moments. I find people that will accept me, and those are the people I was open and completely straight with. And then, a lot of other people I was a lot more careful with. So it it was this movement toward, no, I think I can do this pretty much all the time. And, it's not as if, I'm not like, and I can't remember the guy's name. I'm not like the chef on TV who yells at everybody. I'm not like raw
Gordon
and
Ramsay.
hurtful.
Yeah.
But Gordon Ramsay. Yeah. I'm not raw and hurtful. And I'm sure some of that's pure entertainment, but I've met people in my career, colleagues, clients, et cetera, that their raw self is actually kind of hurtful and damaging. I'm not that, but I do have a lot of, I'd say off-putting thinking. And, just as a like real simple example, I was on a call yesterday with, a guy who's a sales rep, and, we were talking about a client that we share, and he said, well, all these things about the client, those are all important. But anyway, sure. Let's talk about them. Let's meet about them, because that's my job. And I'm like, that's not your job. Your job is to sell stuff. Like, so if you don't want to talk to them because you think it won't become a sale, don't. Like that. No, your job is not to play the part. And so I do have kind of like I read a line once, I think describes me, that, is what I'm saying I could finally kind of live with almost 100% of the time, which is I hear all the things that you hear and everyone hears, but the things that I think and say based on that are things you've never heard before. And that's a weird thing about me. And it can really make people feel uncomfortable, or that I'm not being professional, but it's just truly like who I am. And, I was definitely holding it back a lot of the time up until that point.
And like you said, you've made that a new habit. So like Mike has the habit now of not giving away his time for free. Your new habit is being free, telling it like it is.
And Mike has made a habit of accepting my raw thinking, and taking it for what it is, and like he said, either embracing it or saying, okay, that's interesting, but not relevant here.
Yeah. Well, and
always interesting.
Oh, yeah. Does it make you nervous, Mike, when you guys are interacting with others, of like, oh gosh, what's he going to say? Or, oh, how's it going to be received? Or is he's pretty good at managing that?
No, no, as in I'm not worried about it. That hasn't even actually crossed my mind. Cause the way that I see it is that if the conversation doesn't go well, it means that it wouldn't have gone anywhere anyways, and we just saved a few months.
Okay. Better to find out it's not
Mike's
a good
understanding
fit
of
now.
me is very I was going to say Mike's understanding of what I'm doing. Mike's understanding of what I'm doing is actually very, very accurate, which is, smoking people out early. So if I pick up on something, I will start to dig on it. And even though, it could kill the conversation, Mike's point is exactly right. Like, I'm trying to avoid drawing something out that's not going anywhere.
Yeah. So, well, thank you both for your stories and some of your reflections on that. Well, we've got some time. I want to talk a little bit about the book. And again, the title is CMO to CRO, the revenue takeover by the next generation executive. And I want to talk a little bit about the company, but tell me about the title. I mean, is it implying that the job title of Chief Marketing Officer should change and become Chief Revenue Officer, or what is that title saying?
So what we're talking about is the modern situation where we found ourselves in revenue generation, revenue growth, revenue as, a part of the business, and how, the CMO is a long-standing executive role that handles one aspect of revenue. And there's been a bit of a, new title of CRO. It's not that new, but, chief revenue officer that gets put and structured in businesses in really different ways. A lot of them are mathematical roles of how to understand pricing and just very specific things. But we see it as a new role that encompasses anything revenue generating, which is marketing, but it's also sales, it's support, it's customer success, just anything that's kind of facing the client. And so that CMO to CRO title is all about us saying, in terms of, statistically betting on a role, we think the CMO role is probably the best one to transition to a CRO. And we talk about how you might actually pull that off based on all of our individual work. So Brandy's, I'm going to shortcut this, even though it's not totally comprehensive, but Brandy's kind of the marketing person. I'm the salesperson. Mike's the technology. And with all of our experiences with clients, we have a good idea of what clients could do to move from a very isolated, siloed, multi-function revenue functions in a business to a single umbrella of revenue. Because we've seen it in part. We've seen certain clients do certain parts well, but no one doing all of it. And so we put our heads together and said, well, if you were going to transition and, change from how you are now to this sort of one revenue team, how would you do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and so I'm curious a little bit about the executive team at your company at Tegrita, because, looking at the website here, I see Brandy's listed as Chief Operating Officer. Mike, your bio that I was sent sells you short. It lists you as Chief Technology Officer, but here on the website, I see it sneaks in. It says Chief Technology Officer, President. It's funny, most people would lead with the president part of that, but I guess your love must be the technology.
I do love the technology, and because I co-founded the company when it started, and the role that I took on was CTO. And I mean, I love technology. I really do. I understand technology. I feel like technology understands me. But my sort of perspective in terms of going back to the book is the way technology is used and how it's currently isolated works against revenue and not for revenue. And we get into that in the book to reorganize that, like the technology and the people, in order to modernize organizational structure and bring the customer forward, and therefore bringing revenue forward holistically.
So is there a parallel between how you're operating as a team and what you recommend with your clients? Because I'm guessing, Mike, can tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, as president, you're overseeing responsibility for the company and for sales and for profitability. As Raleigh pointed out, you hired him to come in to that role. Are you working together internally and with your clients to make sure, for example, it's not just technology for technology's sake, that technology needs to be facilitating sales and profitability?
There's a bunch of questions in there.
Sure.
Let me try to.
I make the mistake of asking. I often make the mistake of asking a question that's two or three questions blurred together. So do your best to unpack that. I apologize.
No, all good. So for me, I focus, on the. So aside from technology, focusing on finance and like legal, like logistical things around keeping your organization running. But when it comes to growth, that is Raleigh's thing and everything that goes under that. And I don't interfere in that. That's not, like, to Raleigh's point, Raleigh's here because of his experience and his perspective on how to bring about growth. And that's not my experience and perspective. So it doesn't make sense for me to get involved there. But going back to, trying to think. Oh, I lost one of your other questions.
Just thinking about, let's see if I can help us out, Raleigh.
I was going to say I can tackle. Yeah, I could tackle some of it, because one of your questions was around, do we structure ourselves in the way we tell our clients to? And yeah, we do. Anything that's, in terms of how we communicate with clients and prospects, and, what you would consider revenue generating communication and strategy, I kind of sit atop of that. We have, Brandy, who's a COO, she makes certain that the way we operate as a business, how process gets handled, how decisions are made in terms of what consultant takes what work, why, how they get paid, how they would get promoted, all these operational pieces. She completely owns that. And because she's a very experienced marketer, as she uses with some of our clients, her strategy, advice and guidance for our biggest clients, she also runs our marketing. Now, at the same time, she's talking with me in the background to say, here's what we came up operationally for marketing. Does that fit kind of what you're doing for growth? So it still kind of rolls up to me in terms of, we've had a few conversations where she said, how about this? And I'm like, no, never, don't ever do that. Please cancel that entire thing. And so every now and then, we'll have that kind of thing, but generally speaking, it's more tweaking, where she'll say, here's the overall plan. And because she knows marketing better than anyone, in detail, and I'm not even doing that justice, how much she understands about the underpinnings of every little thing. I don't get into the weeds. I just touch base with her, and I'm involved so that the overall kind of growth strategy and where we're headed and the messaging sort of stays sort of aligned with what I'm trying to accomplish for the business.
Well, thank you for making the best of my attempt at a question. There's something I'm going to work on there, so I'll stop beating myself up for the mistake. But I was going to ask you, when you talk about marketing technology, or people use the phrase marketing automation, how would you describe that elevator speech wise to a listener who really doesn't know what that is?
Sure, I'll tackle that one. So I would say marketing automation is a type of marketing technology. And marketing technology would be anything that marketing would use to help them engage with their customers, prospects, everyone in between. So the automation of marketing, and that's where the marketing automation technologies come into play. And examples would be HubSpot, Eloqua, Marketo, and so marketing automation would be used to help automate tasks that marketers used to do manually. So I'll give an example of a task that used to be manual, let's say 10 years ago, and for some people, unfortunately, still today. But you had an event. If anybody remembers what an event is, it's where people meet in person in a large group.
We're going to get back to that soon.
People stop by a booth and they give you your card. Soon, hopefully. Let's say people give you a card or whatever, or nowadays you have a scan gun. But back in 10 years ago, that wasn't really the case. So people give business cards, and so then you have to put together this Excel list, and then you have to manually go and send people a follow-up note. So that would take days to do. It's just a lot of work. So from an automation standpoint, you can now have your scanning gun connected directly into a marketing automation platform that will result in that person receiving a thank you email with a whole bunch of links to related content within minutes. So scan, send email. And that, again, that's a choice. It could be minutes, it could be hours, it could be days, because you don't necessarily want to follow up with someone immediately just because you can. That gets a little creepy at times, and people aren't necessarily focused on looking at their emails while they're out at an event. Another example that should be maybe a little bit more relatable is for those who have contact forms on websites, which I would hope is everyone. The follow-up from that form, and even in my own experience, I fill out forms and it goes into a black hole. And I'm like, especially me with the technology that I work with, it's extremely frustrating. So when people have some sort of a tool in place to capture that form, send an autoresponder, follow up a couple of days later with me on other information on the website related to the product that I'm interested in, that keeps me engaged while you're trying to figure out who is going to get in touch with me, which sales rep is going to be. So that's, again, automation. And I'm just being super basic. It can be very, 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 very sophisticated, because let's say you have sophisticated products, or you have like a free trial and you want to educate people on it. So again, marketing automation technology allows you to take data from your, let's say, free trial system to pull in the usage data into a table, and then based on what features have been used, what features have not been used, send follow-up emails educating people on the features they're using, the features they're not using, so that they can increase adoption and hopefully increase conversion.
Well, thank you for that explanation. And I mean, when I think of automation, even not meaning like software, website, email automation, but thinking of like back in my career roots in manufacturing, thinking about automation, there's always that warning about, don't try automating a bad process. Don't automate the waste, improve the process first before trying to automate it. Is there any parallel to that when it comes to marketing technology or marketing automation? We make sure we're not automating the wrong
100%.
thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's really, I would even say, bigger technology in general. Automation just makes things faster, which means if you have a stupid process, it's going to be that much dumber. If you have garbage data, it's going to be that much more, garbagey. If you have, bad processes, they're just going to break. They're just going to snap. Like if somebody wasn't, let's say if you had a person in the middle of a process and you automate that process, now that person's overloaded and the process breaks entirely. So automation will quickly identify the things that were broken, but you didn't know it was broken because it wasn't broken badly enough. But generally speaking, garbage in, garbage out. Automation is not a magical, mythical creature that makes things all better. It enables you to execute your business processes faster. So if those are good processes, great. If they're bad processes, well, you're going to have to redo those.
And I just want to share one quick story here. I think she would get, I think she would laugh about it if she was here. So I don't mean to talk behind the back of a previous guest, but I just want to tell, to me, this was funny. So my guest in episode 71 was April Davis. She is the founder and CEO of a company called Luma. They're luxury matchmakers. So it's Luma Search, Luma Luxury Matchmaking. And we connected on LinkedIn, as I do with many of my guests, because we had done the episode. And, it's just, I don't know, you link to her profile. And so I click connect. She's a good person. I want to keep in touch. About a day later, I got a LinkedIn direct message from her that was clearly, kind of just automated of like, okay, if I get a new contact, then send a message. Like she sent a message pitching me for matchmaking services, even though she knew from our conversations that I've been married almost 20 years and I'm looking to remain married and I do not need the services of a matchmaker. So I'm like, oh, whoops, but that automation, like it didn't cost her any time or money probably to send that message. But I imagine in the line of work she's in, she's got to be careful that she's not sending that pitch to someone who's not open to it.
Yeah. And that like audience segmentation is one of those critical things that requires a lot of data and a lot of thought, because in order to be able to say that, okay, Mark, you are happily married and you want to stay that way, there has to be some sort of data point indicating that. And if it's an unknown, then there should probably be a question asking if you're if you're interested.
Yeah.
But that sort of process is complex, and simple automations usually don't have that available. So they'll be like, new contact, do this. And it's a very, if this, then that, with no in between, with no logic in between. But when you have sophisticated systems like a marketing automation system, you could build in all of this logic. And it doesn't have to be a map. It could be a chat bot. It could be anything else that has logic for stuff, where, especially when it comes to interaction with people at the end of it. But there are things that you can do to create multiple workflows and allow for multiple data inputs to have 100 different variations, and that's just simple exponential, right? So if you have 3 branches with 3 decisions each, you're going to get to like 27 different outcomes, and that's already very personal.
So maybe there's some opportunity for anybody who's doing marketing and contact through LinkedIn. Be careful with the simple approach and look for something a little more sophisticated. So, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I apologize, April, for I had given her some feedback privately. So my mistakes, I guess all our mistakes are fodder for discussion here. But I want to thank our 2 guests today. They're both, again, they're executives with a company called Tegrita. Raleigh Keenan, the Chief Revenue Officer, Mike Geller, the Chief Technology Officer and President. I'm going to get you on the ending here with both titles. And again, they are 2 of the 3 authors with their colleague, Brandy Starr. The book available now, CMO to CRO, The Revenue Takeover by the Next Generation Executive. So the website for the company is tegrita.com. It'll be in the show notes. I know you've got information about the book right there on the front page. That's the best place for people to go?
That, and they can also go to revenuetakeover.com to read more about the book.
Well, great. I hope people will check that out. So again, Raleigh, Mike, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
To learn more about Mike and Raleigh and their book and their company and more, you can go to markgraban.com/mistake102. As always, I want to thank you for listening. I hope this podcast inspires you to reflect on your own mistakes, how you can learn from them or turn them into a positive. I've had listeners tell me they started being more open and honest about mistakes in their work. And they're trying to create a workplace culture where it's safe to speak up about problems, because that leads to more improvement and better business results. If you have feedback or a story to share, you can email me, myfavoritemistakepodcast@gmail.com. And again, our website is myfavoritemistakepodcast.com.